Port Chicago, the forgotten disaster on U.S. soil, it was the deadliest military accident on American soil during the entire course of the Second World War. An explosion so violent it erased 2 ships from the map, shattered windows in towns more than 15 miles away, and left behind nothing but a massive crater and silence. And yet, almost no one remembers it today. July 17th, year 1944. Port Chicago, a small naval munitions base in California just northeast of San Francisco. Here, young sailors, many of them African American, working in segregated units, were under relentless pressure to load bombs, artillery shells, mines, and depth charges onto 2 cargo ships, SS E.A. Bryan and SS Queen Victory. The E.A. Bryan had been loading ammunition for nearly 4 days. By that night, it held almost 4,000 tons of explosives, bombs of every size, naval mines, artillery shells, and thousands of pounds of high explosives packed tightly together. The Queen Victory had only just begun loading munitions and was nowhere near as full, but it too carried dangerous explosives in its hold. At exactly 10:31 p.m., the unthinkable happened. A massive explosion erupted with the force of nearly 2,000 tons of TNT. The E.A. Bryan was vaporized. The entire pier was obliterated. The Queen Victory was torn apart like a toy, twisted steel raining down across the port. A crater replaced the dock. In an instant, 320 men were killed. Another almost 400 were seriously injured. The blast shot debris thousands of feet into the air and shattered windows in towns over 15 miles away. The shockwave rippled across the entire Bay Area. Some thought it was a Japanese airstrike. Others believed it was sabotage. But the reality was far more devastating. It had come from within. The sailors had never been trained to handle explosives. They were told to work faster and faster, often competing with each other to see who could load the most tonnage in the least amount of time. While handling bombs and mines that could detonate from the slightest mishandling, safety protocols were non-existent. Speed was everything. The Port Chicago dock was a ticking time bomb. And on that night, it finally went off. In the aftermath, hundreds of surviving sailors, traumatized and terrified, refused to return to the docks. The U.S. Navy called it mutiny. 50 men were court-martialed in the largest mutiny trial in Navy history. But they weren't mutineers. They were survivors, victims of a system that had failed them. To this day, Port Chicago remains one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in American history. But despite its magnitude, the tragedy has been largely erased from public memory. There are no major Hollywood films, no National Day of Mourning, just a quiet memorial along the shoreline and a silence that has lasted for generations. This is not just a story about a deadly accident. It is a story about race, sacrifice, and a lack of justice, a wartime disaster buried under bureaucracy, steel, and time. Nearly a century later, it is time to remember.